Great. So today what we're doing is the purchasing walkthrough. The walkthroughs, for those of you that weren't involved, the only other walkthrough you've had so far is the new item. It's very repetitive in a lot of things from our design plan, where we kind of go over what the system will do. The difference really is that we are pointing out to you things that you asked for in the design process, and hopefully we've come to the table with. And the other thing is that we're really turning it over. This is in your system, not in someone else's. And we're really hopefully empowering you to start clicking some buttons. So the goal of what this meeting is, we're going to go over it and walk through the process. Well, that's why it's called a walkthrough. And then within the next few days or week, what will happen is Matt will communicate with you that everything that we said in this meeting, like if we said, hey, this is open or this is not done, he's going to keep in contact with you of when that is done. A lot of stuff is ready today for you to click and do right now. But there will be a few things that I'll tell you, hey, they're going to get back to you on this and kind of roll that out. So our goal is that you start clicking buttons. The new item walkthrough, as well as this purchasing walkthrough, you'll be getting a document over this next week that will kind of go over what we went through in this training, and you're going to have a sign-off. The sign-off is not that everything is working correctly. It's not that you've tested everything. It's that you understand the training and you feel like you have access. You understand what you're supposed to do. You'll have another sign-off later that has to do with we've tested everything and everything is working. This sign-off is to say, I've gotten the training I need, I know where to go to click in the buttons, and I understand the topics that have been covered with me. Does that make sense on what the walkthrough is supposed to accomplish and what your sign-off will be?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't need signed off by every user.
No, we usually, Mike, and this will be up to you whether you want to sign it off as a project manager, or what we have done in the past, typically it's the super user of that area. So whoever is that super user of that area, it's their responsibility to say, yes, I've got that video, I know where the training is, I have connected, and I understand what I'm supposed to be testing. After that, again, another sign off later down the road saying whether everything worked and all that good stuff. It's just to say you received the training, you can connect, you understand what you're supposed to be testing.
Okay, now I believe you've already set up Barbara and Greg with user credentials.
Yeah.
To log into the system. But I need Tom set up. So who should I send that information to get him in? Just
send that to your Infusion Hartley little email group, and then Matt will probably pick that up and set it up and send it back, but he'll let the whole group know.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Any questions on what the walkthrough is going to accomplish today, or the sign up for that process, what we hope to accomplish today?
No, we're good.
Good. As you log in to your screen to Infusion, you'll have your Infusion icon on your desktop. You'll log in and you'll log into Hartley and Parker Limited, and you'll see that down below here, as you can see where my date is, my company I'm logged in, and my user ID, which right now I'm logged in as SA. One thing to remember is a lot of times on these reminders, you might not have reminders set up on your home screen. Matt can help you do that as things are important to you. We will also, more importantly, show you how to do it, because it is very user friendly, so you can customize your own home screen. There are some stuff, though, that you will see automatically, regardless of, as long as you have access to the purchasing area. And that's this purchasing navigation list here to the left, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today. In this navigation list, Matt has already set up these workflow processes that we talked about before. So we talked about purchase orders not printed, purchase orders not received, and purchase orders not invoiced. So this is the process of what you'll go through in the workflow that we're presenting today. As you go to those, when I click on them, Matt has staged some fake POs into your system just so we can use it for testing purposes. Our goal would be that you put in realistic POs for your own self. Now, as you're walking through this process, you might come across some data issues. Like, for instance, I put in a PO and I put in an item number and you don't agree to the FOB that pulls up. Or you put in a vendor and an item, and when you do that, it says it's not assigned, that vendor is not assigned to that item. If that's the case, you want to follow back with Mike and Gary on your data. Now, some instances, right, might be like FOB, for example, where the FOB isn't right. That could be because maybe your data is old. Remember, we took this data from earlier this year. So if there's been an FOB change, you're not going to see it in the system right now. It's going to be older data. Don't let that stop you from testing. You need to push forward and still test that information. Now, it could be that that FOB has never been assigned to that item, and then we'll want to follow back with Gary and Mike. Now, there is testing going on into the system. Our consultants try to be cognizant of not screwing up your data too much, but there are instances where they purposely change an FOB or they purposely change that. It should leave a record in the system and we should be able to tell you, oh, that's because of testing. But make sure you look at that data and follow back with your data team if something seems off, because a lot of times that's how data problems are really found, is during this testing process. Does that make sense as far as data and what you're looking at when you kind of go through this process?
Good. Okay, we're good.
Okay. Now, oh, and I see an action I left off. I was adjusting these before, and I should have added this one. Let me add one here that is, my action, so I will have to look at that. New purchase order. I'm going to have to come back to that. It looks like it's gotten removed, and I'm not really sure why it's not sitting here to open. So that'll be a task on our list to get you. So what I can do from here, normally you'll have an action here that says new. I'm not sure why that's not showing, so we'll figure that out. But we're going to go to purchase order and transactions, purchasing, purchase order entry. This is how I just create a brand new purchase order. So you're going to type it in. When you tab off, it will default to a PO number. This isn't going to be your final PO numbers. You do get say in how you want to set that PO number when we get towards go live. You'll tell us what PO number you want to start. Right now, we've just started with a generic PO, and then it'll say, we started with 001, so we're up to 20 at this point. You do have the option of entering a buyer ID. We have set some buyer IDs up. These look like test. We'll need to set it up. We talked in the past about setting it up with your username, which is your first initial last name. I think you've given those. It looks like maybe we just haven't set that up. So that'll be a task for us.
I feel like they want to do more generic. Last time they haven't given us a final.
Okay, so Mike, is that true? You guys maybe have not given us a final of buyer IDs?
We haven't decided.
Okay.
Personally, we'll just go with the first initial last name.
Okay, perfect. So do you
want me to put that in writing?
Yeah, well, if you can just send us a list of who that would be, because your user IDs to GP is first initial last name, right? Yeah. So it's nice if those sync up. So that's good. So we'll get those buyers set up. Now, buyers are optional. You can leave this field blank, but what's nice is you can, in a smart list or in a navigation list, you can sort and see by buyer ID. So I can only see I want to see my POs that are open. It gives you an option there. The date of the PO is going to default to today. We talked about all these lovely dates that you have over here: required date, promise ship date. So those are dates that you can use. Promise ship date is the only date that we will use in another process that I'll walk through as well today. The other two are definable by you. You guys came back with one of those dates to use, and we haven't updated our decision part here, but what was that date to use?
POA and then ship date.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing maybe as an open item for you, Hartley Purchasing team, you guys can use these other two fields, required date and promise date, as things that indicate for you guys when you have either heard back a confirmation, or when you have when the vendor has communicated to you that you will receive the product, or your first initial hope to get the product. Those things can all be used on these three dates: requisition date, required date, and promise date. Promise ship date is the only date that we are using as it is relates to when it's going to show up on your door, that you'll update later. Does that make sense? Any questions on the dates?
Yeah, didn't we have some discussion about having a ship date when we want the supplier to ship it?
We did have discussion of that. I don't think it came back on your decisions for sure which field you wanted to use for that. Any of those dates could be used for that. So I would think a task for you, and I'm sorry if we missed it and you think you decided it. I'm not seeing it on our decision list,
it's
but
okay. Sorry. I'll
Yeah.
get it right back to you.
okay.
It would be we would just use the promise ship date field. I can tell you that right now.
No, promise ship date is what we're using. That's when it is.
I gotta get something else.
So promise ship date is going to be the one that our truck workbook updates. That's when they have scheduled, and it's going to show up on your door. So the warehouse has been called, and it's going to be scheduled. They will update the promise ship date in our workbook that we'll walk through in a minute.
Okay.
These other three fields, requisition date, required date, and promise date, you can use for your definition. I just can't change the wording on here if you remember from our design plan. But you can use those dates,
Yeah, I do.
for your own internal reasons.
All right, we'll have a discussion about that after.
Okay. So we'll note that as an open item for you guys.
I'm sorry, Corrie, I'm talking to my group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Feel good about that?
Do you know what those names are, Mike, that they have listed?
I'm gonna, Corrie, can you just go?
Oh, yeah. You want me to pull that back up? Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick so I can write them. Okay, so we're not gonna use requisition date because I want that to stay. So it's either the required date or the promise date.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not the promise ship date, but the
Promise ship date, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't use that. So it'll either be required or the, what was the other one? Promised.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Corrie.
Okay. Good. Okay. The next thing is we're going to pick a vendor. I'm just going to pick 195. And I'm going to enter this item here. And you're going to enter your item. You can type it in like I did here, or you can do a Control-L, and then you can look up by, you can find by description or by item, etc. It does let you pick other items. If you, for some reason, picked an item, I'm going to just tab through. We'll come back to all of this information in a second. I just want to show you, if I picked an item that was not assigned to this vendor, so I don't have a vendor and item relationship set up, it's going to give me this prompt. This item has not been assigned to this vendor item number. Do you want to assign it to the vendor item number? Now, what that is telling you is in the system, you haven't made a connection between this item to this vendor. Now, sometimes this is okay. You still want to order it. It could be that you're ordering it from another wholesaler. It could be that you're ordering it from a different ship point that you've never ordered it before. So all of those things might be reasons why you want to go ahead and add another vendor. It could be I fat fingered the item number, so I would not want to do that at this time. If you feel like you typed in an item and it should have had a relationship with that vendor, then that might be something you want to, again, go back to Mike and Gary about your data. Is it something that maybe didn't come over correct in your data that you feel like that should have been a connection? Everybody understand this process?
Yeah, we're good.
Now, if I hit yes to this, all it's going to do is bring me to the item vendor maintenance screen. You can get to this screen from the item card if you remember during our item walkthrough, if you were a part of those meetings. Within here, I can put a vendor item number, or I can put just it'll default to the item number of the item itself. I also have the ability, this is in bottles, but to put minimum, maximum, economic order point. It's all the same kind of stuff you fill in typically when you first set up an item.
Sorry,
Yep,
Corey, can you give me a moment here? I'm sorry.
sure. Thank you. Can you make sure you do it to all of them?
Came up, right, because the item number wasn't assigned, it's
Right.
back at.
And
She assigned it.
she purposely pulled the wrong vendor
Yeah.
to demonstrate this. Yeah, no, it's our data, but she purposely pulled the wrong vendor to show what's
Yeah.
gonna happen. All right, sorry, Corey, I just wanted to,
That's okay.
go ahead.
No problem. So all of this information, again, you can set up on the fly, if you will, if you're having to order this item outside of its normal place and time. So I'm just going to delete this at this point because I really didn't want to do it. I just want to show you the example. So once I've typed in my item, it's going to default to the FOB once I put in the quantity. I entered 50 here. It's going to default to my unit of measure here as well, which is typically case. You can choose it to another unit of measure that has been assigned to this item. So that's in bottles. Obviously, you never purchase it in gallons, but it will show you gallons as well. Now, one thing we're going to follow up on with you, and I hope to have that meeting with you by the end of next week, is on purchasing unit of measure. We're going to handle that in a totally separate meeting, how you can purchase in a different unit of measure than selling, and it will actually default to what will be called a P case. And the P case is the purchasing unit of measure, so it knows I got to purchase this in 6 packs, but when I'm selling it, I'm really selling it in 12 packs. So that will default in correctly for you at the item level as well. Again, we'll handle that kind of separate. There's a few things you need to know about that process. So I put in 50 cases. It will default my FOB that I've assigned to that vendor item combination. So in this case, I've assigned $93.07. Now, again, I'm going to go back to your data. If for some reason that is horribly off on an FOB, go back to your data, people, and let's make sure that the data given was correct. It could be, again, this is old data, so if you've had an FOB change in the last couple months, it's not going to do anything for that. Now, other information defaulted in for this item behind the scenes that I want to briefly touch on. If I hit this blue expansion arrow, I'm going to go into the item detail for this line item. It pulled in, or it will pull in, your landed cost group. Now, for now, you guys don't have any landed cost groups. We're still working through that process. So when you do, it will default in from whatever is assigned at the item. Remember, it's your option during the entry of the purchase order. If for some reason that landed cost group should be something different for this particular PO, you can change it at this line item as well. Otherwise, it will do whatever is the default at the item. Now, another note to do is all of the plethora of notes that are available for my line item. So I have several notes, and some are internal, some are external, meaning it's going to print on your PO. Now, Matt set one out there for us, so I'm just going to hit save on this one. We're going to come back to this little guy I was doing, but I'm going to go into this PO number 12 here, where Matt's kind of put some notes for me already. So I'm going to hit edit. I just clicked it, and I hit edit. So the first note I want to talk about is here at the additional side. We have PO specific notes. PO specific notes are notes that are only for this PO. I want to print it at the bottom and it's going to say something. So it's going to, this one we just put a test in there, but you want something to be communicated only about this PO and then it goes away. Another note is our shipping note. So here I have a PO note. This is kept at the vendor level. So you can see on vendor 10, I have a PO note that was taken, and every time I enter a PO for vendor 10, this note is going to default. So sometimes, a lot of times, that's common about the way I'm supposed to pick up the product or who I'm supposed to contact about the product, etc. PO specific and vendor related shipping notes. Any questions on those two before I go on with other notes?
No, go ahead, Corrie.
Okay. At the line item specifically, you can also have a specific line item note. So in here at the line item, I've hit the blue expansion arrow next to the comment ID, and I've put test line comment there. So what that is a specific note that will show on the PO underneath the specific line item. So if you want to say something specific about that item, like make sure to ship, with wrapped in a certain material, or maybe it has to do with the pricing. I'm supposed to get a buy 3, get 1 free. All of those things can be typed in at the item specific note. The other note I have here is more so related to my truck comments. So this usually would be like Western carriers, it might be your California truck 1, etc. And these will be comments IDs that you actually will save. Now you can put a comment that every time I pick Western carriers, I want it to also show this kind of note. So you could put something in there as well so that that note is on there too. Most of the time people just put the actual comment about Western carriers or whoever shipping company they're doing. Now, other notes that we have on here won't print on the PO, but are internal notes. That has a little notepad here you can see next to the PO number. Wherever you see this little notepad, it's going to keep an internal note next to the field that it is actually going to keep the note. So in this case, this note is going to stay with this PO. And, oops, sorry, I was on the wrong field. I'm going to hit save again. There we go. So on here, it's my PO 12, and I'm going to do an internal note. When I attach that internal note, notice it turns to yellow and has writing on it. Now I can attach a note to the buyer. Every time I use this buyer, my note will pop up. I can attach it to a vendor. Every time I pull up this vendor, there will be a note. I can attach it to a window. That's anything at the bottom, meaning every time I'm in this window, this note. It doesn't matter what PO is on here. Every time I'm in this window, I'll see this note. Sometimes that's instructions or reminders, something like that. Any questions on those internal notes?
What might be the use for the window note?
Typically instructions, like for instance on your dates, that would be a good one. Here's a window note for that date. And if you put on there, required date will be when you get confirmations. If they can't remember, they can go there. Oh yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to put that there. I don't have a ton of people that use a lot of window notes, but I will say, I had one company that had a temp, and they literally attached the, because you can do attachments, you can do different copy and paste into here, And they literally took their instructional book, step 1, step 2, step 3, and they pasted it in here. And then that way when the temps came in, they knew exactly what to do. So.
And then you can delete those notes?
Yep, you can. You can just go here. It's one full note. So like this note all together, you just keep adding to it. Now you can delete within it. If I had 5 lines, I can delete 2 of the lines, etc. But you can delete the whole note as well. The difference of that is like one big text field versus when I go up here to my additional, PO specific notes. These are individual notes, so like I can add another one. Add PO specific note. We'll talk about receiving. Hit save. These you can see I can have a couple with different days and time that stamps with what user did it, and then I can delete one of these at a time versus the other one, it is one full text thing.
So on the PO specific note, you're only limited by space on what we'll print on the bottom of the PO.
You're exactly right. Yep. Now, one thing I should have noted also, another note you can have on here, I went over the PO, but I didn't say this one, receiving. You can add a note just to the receiving people. This will show on their pre-receiving report. So if there was something, make sure for cold storage, then you could do it there and it would be a receiving note. It wouldn't print on the PO. That will happen afterwards on the pre-receiving report. Any questions about notes?
Yeah, we're good, Corrie. Thanks.
Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to come back to is this quantity canceled because I want to print the PO. I want to show you one thing before I print this one again. I'm going into here to my not printed. If you remember, I did this PO as we were talking. And I'm just going to go, if you double click on any of those, it'll go into an inquiry. If you click on it and hit edit up here, it'll go to where you can modify it. So just a tip for that. So on here, notice that this status says new. So the system has a few different statuses on purchase orders. New, meaning I've entered it, but I haven't printed it or emailed it. So that is when it is just new. Released is when I've either printed it or emailed it to the printer or to an email. It thinks you've sent it to the vendor. Now, whether or not you really sent it, I just printed it for my own purposes, the computer can't tell you. But the computer knows you did an action, which means that it spit out that PO, which means that it, in its world, has been released. If I go in and change anything on a line item, it's going to change the status to change order. Change order means that it has happened, but I haven't yet printed it or sent it to the vendor. At the time I print or send, it'll take it back to a release status. The next status is received. That's when I have received the product. And then the last status is closed. That's when I've invoice matched it. So all of those have this status that is running here. Now, at any time, there's an overall purchase order status. That means this whole purchase order meets this criteria, and all of it is that status. So like for new, it's pretty obvious. You know, once you print it, all the lines go to release and the whole PO is released. However, there can be instances where some things are, different line items are at a different status, because you can partially receive a PO, you can partially cancel a PO, you can, do all sorts of things, invoice match partially. So the whole PO might not be at one status. You might have different line items at different statuses. So in order to kind of manage that, you can also see that through the edit purchase order status. So I'm just going to click on this PO we were playing with, one of the ones here I have, and I'm going to go to edit. Oh, let me go one that has a couple line items, sorry. There we go, this is a good one. And I'm gonna go to edit purchase order status. On edit purchase order status, I can see the status of each individual line item. So until the whole PO has reached a status, this one might say released, but I might have one line item here that is canceled. The whole PO isn't canceled, so the overall status is still going to say released, but the individual line item might have been canceled off of it. Same goes with some might be received, some might be whatever. Until the whole PO moves to the next status, it'll remain at the previous status. So does that kind of make sense what I'm talking about as far as line item status and the purchase order status and what those statuses mean?
Yes, but I have a question, okay, to go one step further. Okay, so you pick cancel.
Uh-huh.
Now, does that line item disappear, or will it always be tagged to that PO, but it'll show that somebody canceled it?
Yeah, good question. No, as long as you've canceled it, and you can do this in a partial way or in a full way. So me doing canceled here, Mike, all that does is, if you notice, it moved 10 from my, it took 10 that I had in the quantity ordered and put all 10 into the quantity canceled field. That's the exact same thing as if I went into my PO, I'm going to pick this one and edit it. Oh, I got to close my window here. So I'm going to go into this one and I'm going to hit edit. If I went into this PO line item here and just said I'm going to cancel 10, it's doing the exact same thing, except I only partially canceled it. So it's still going to show the line item, or if I did all of it, it'll show full 25 there. It's still going to show on there, and it's going to calculate in order to show me that I canceled that many. Now, if you remember from our design plan, one of the things I mentioned there, where we really like this canceled field because a lot of distributors use that as record to how much they tried to order it, but for some reason the vendor would not complete the order, meaning they were out of stock themselves, they canceled it for whatever purpose because of shipping reasons, whatever it might be, it has been canceled on them. Then in a smart list, which I'll go to here afterwards, you can then see all the line items that have been canceled on you. So you can run a report to show that and sit down with your vendor to say, why are you canceling so many line items? Even if you don't use it for that purpose, it's really great to give you information to say, hey, that I did try to order it, but now for some reason I had to dial back that quantity, not maybe a correction. You, of course, can also just change the quantity on the PO, but that doesn't leave you a record to say that, hey, I had to dial 5 out of it. You can also go into a PO and delete a line item individually. Again, but it's not going to show on the PO anymore, and it's not going to give me a record that I canceled that line item. Does that make sense?
So probably better to cancel than delete stuff, so we know what's going on. Yeah. To Paula's point, give me a second here, Jamie.
Yeah, sure.
To Paula's point, I know you guys order stuff that, if you don't meet a minimum order quantity, they charge us more. So that's the type of thing we're going to want to pay attention to. If they cut it back, we should have. All right, thanks, buddy.
Okay. Notice now, just to prove my point of status changes, notice this now says change order. I have a revision of 1. If I was to save this and not print it, it's going to stay at a change order status. The minute I print or email this, it will then change to released back to released. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and print this.
Is there a place you can see all of the orders you have yet to release?
Yep, that's that not printed. And I'll go over that again here in just a second. Good question, though. So I'm going to print this to screen. Now, one of the things John is working on, and I touched base with him today, I know is working with you guys on your email server setup. So right now, your emails are not going to work out of the system. I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks they are. So then we can start testing your email process. But when you do that, you can go to print or delivery. If I click that box to print or delivery, and the option you picked from our design plan meeting is that when I hit print or deliver and I choose deliver, it will pop up a box for, or pop up my email. You do have to have your Outlook open, and an email will come up with the email from the vendor, and it will attach the PO as a PDF. Does that make sense? And you can do both. You can deliver and print, you can just print, or you can deliver. Again, deliver in our word means email. So in this case, I'm just going to hit to screen so we can see the PO together. Now, I think Matt sent you a couple kind of clarifying questions on a couple items on your purchase order. But otherwise, I think we modified this to what your request is. I noticed my little, that's an open item for us, Matt. That little asterisk is, it should be next to it, not on top of it. But that little asterisk shows any that have a change order. Notice the asterisk in the change order. So it will be right here next to the item number, not on top of the item number, but it will show then this one has been changed. It does not show the vendor a record of what it was to what it is now. It does not keep a record for you to say every single change I've had. I went from 25 to 20 to 15. It only shows what it is now and that it has been changed at some point. Once I've printed this, it is no longer than changed. It has been released and it won't show that star again. Now on here, notice I'm going to point out some of our notes here. I did this test line item comment, so you can see that that's showing underneath this Dickel number 8 that I put the line item comment on. I'm going to scroll down here. Notice that I have my test PO specific note. I've tested, this is the vendor where it's going to show on every PO for the vendor. So both of those notes show as well. So I have my my buyer that's listed, or I don't, the contacts from the vendor, excuse me. Oh, the buyer contact, I'm sorry, yep. So we have that down below, and that was added there as well. And notice here's my carrier. This was my truck comment ID that I put. My truck, I put Western Carriers there. So that goes there. What were your open questions,
There was
Matt?
the top, there was a ship via and a carrier, and Mike was going to decide which you wanted.
Okay,
Yeah.
so right
Okay.
here,
Carriers, the truck,
Just the top.
yeah.
carriers, the truck it's on, and the warehouse is where it's coming from. Yes.
So we just need to identify where that is in the data, right? That's your question. So on the vendor, where do we pull that from the vendor card? Does that make sense?
You need me to identify that?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know where where you want us to pull that information from.
Height.
Yeah, right now, I'm sorry, David. Yeah, no, David's right. Yeah, we don't have it anywhere right now. Maybe that's something we have to
Oh, okay.
set up for you, or we can do as we go along.
Yeah.
You know, as they come across things, as the purchasing folks come across things, we can just update the card at that time, if that's okay.
It is. The key is to say, are you going to update that at the vendor level, or is that at a PO level specific?
Probably be, well, maybe we should have some discussion on the faces I'm getting, but I'm thinking it'd probably be at the vendor level.
Yeah, so then what we have to decide, just to give you an idea here, I'm going to just pull up this Diageo. So you have a purchasing address ID at the vendor card, and you have these fields available. You've got several fields, you know, that you can put information into that maybe we aren't using, or it's a certain level of contact. We just have to know which field we would want to use if we were going to pull that information. Or do we need a separate field that you can add something if we don't have a field available for you to do so? Does that make sense where I'm going with that?
Kind of, but like, where would you have Western Carriers, New Jersey? That wouldn't be any vendor.
Nope. So that goes back to where it's a PO. So if I did a PO, let me go back to this guy. So going back to how I assigned that truck. So at the PO, I assigned a comment of Western Carriers. That's my truck ID that I'm going to do. Now, if you want to keep some information about Western Carriers, so like maybe that is where the information you're going to tell me is coming from, then I can maybe enter that here, location A. And then what we have to do is say, okay, every time you enter, you know, Western, this is saved with it, by the way. So every time I do Western Carriers, it'll automatically bring in this comment to say location A. But that's what you want to show in this field is that location A. If it was different, you would change it on here to be different, but it'll be saved with it. Does that make sense?
Well, the carrier would be Pace Motors out of Stratford, Connecticut, and the warehouse could be Western Carriers, New Jersey, it could be Norton, Massachusetts, it could be MS Walker.
If it was different per PO of where you're shipping it, that goes back to our PO shipping note. That's what people or PO specific note. Now, if you're saying I want a PO note here plus a PO note, which was one of our questions in your design plan, but we could add an additional note here that would be like a shipping term note or shipping note. And then you could have that pull into the PO, but that would be adding it on each PO. So if it varies by, you know, PO of where that's going to come from, then we'd want to set a note specific to that PO.
No, it's just similar to the way we do it now. The only thing that's kind of confusing is for carrier, you have Western Carriers, but Western Carriers isn't actually a carrier, it's just a warehouse.
Okay, so you can turn that to Pace.
Pick it up, yeah, good.
Will the warehouse?
Corey, I seem to recall a discussion on the vendors that you were gonna set up, vendor codes based on the, warehouse location.
That is correct. Each vendor.
The Diageo Ireland for Bailey's items, Bolingbrook for Captain Morgan, and then that would tell us where it's shipping from.
You are exactly right. The vendor you should send us attached to the items in your data should be the ship point vendor. Then you link the vendors together into a reporting vendor. So you're exactly right. So if I have those multiple ship points for Diageo, as we're on here, I would have a 10 for Diageo, whatever your main one is, 10-1 you could do for other ship points. And then, of course, as we went over here, you can have that PO shipping note that is located at the vendor level. So every time I pull in that vendor, that's where this note shows. Currently, right now, that shows on your PO down here at the bottom. So maybe you want to change where that location is.
Yeah, maybe that
We
would.
could do like provide a vendor card.
The shipping point vendors, like she was just saying, like 10-1 for Bailey's, whatever it is.
I don't think we've done,
Diageo, I don't think we've done that yet.
No. We haven't done that, no.
We could pull it
So-
with vendor origin code, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was 140, and then each of the locations had its own code.
Okay.
140
So we need to provide you, based on the discussion we're having here, we need to provide you the vendor origin code, Corey.
It'll be in your next round of data. That's what you will assign to the item will be that vendor, what you're calling origin code. We call it into the vendor ship point of what it is. And that's the vendor that'll be attached to the item. And then you have to have that vendor set up in your vendor master record as well. So vendor master record will have it. The item record will have it assigned as that vendor number. Good. Makes sense your options as far as what to show and where to put stuff? vendor, keep it at the truck level, or keep it at a PO specific comment. So those are your three options of where you can keep data. We just need to narrow down where you want to show that for this section up here.
How to get it there.
Mm-hmm.
You just change there out the ship point, and just remove that.
Print out the card, and then these are the shipping points.
Mhm.
So that's what the new vendor number would be. So it would roll to
Right.
140, but then we'd enter it as this if we're shipping out of Western carriers and then the location.
Okay,
That's how they all have to be done.
okay, so we gotta get that over to them.
Yep.
Okay. Did you give this to me already?
No.
Oh, okay.
I
did I-
did,
did
that
I-
was
did
from
I-
the last meeting, but I worked
Okay,
it,
all right, good.
talked to Paul about it, but I think that's,
Do we have this for everything?
no, but we could get it.
Yeah, we're
It's
gonna
in
need, we're gonna need to
I
get
think
this.
Gary could run a
Okay.
report up.
You know what you're talking about?
No, not
All right,
necessarily.
we'll get back to this. We'll get back to this, Corey. We can
Okay.
talk about this after the meeting.
Good. Feel good about the PO as far as what I showed you and what you know needs to be open?
Yes, except you didn't touch on one thing, because I've been waiting for this. Okay, so after we talked about how there's nothing defined as ship date, as a supplier ship date, on the PO entry screen, you have a ship date on the PO.
Well,
So do we have to?
do you know what field,
What's that?
do you know what field you're pulling here to this ship date?
The promise ship date.
Yeah, so that's probably a bad choice. What he is pulling is this promise ship date. That's probably not true. You need to define which one you want to pull to there. Because promise ship date is going to stay the same as the PO date until you update it in the POs on truck. So it would be silly to put that onto your PO, but we've done it. But you need to pick one of these other dates. Yeah.
It's okay, I just wanted to kind of get to that point.
Yes.
Of understanding, it's obviously nothing that's difficult for you to map
No.
with those words.
No, but that kind of goes back to that open item of you just need to define those dates better.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. I mean, no problem.
Good. Good. Any other questions on your PO?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, good. Again, email will come out 2 to 3 weeks, I'm hoping, as John works to get your email stuff set up. And then we can actually test and do that. One note about that, on the vendor maintenance card, when I go into vendors, the purchasing address, whatever is here, notice it's telling me for POs, I need to use the purchasing address ID. When I go to that purchasing address ID, which happens to be showing here, which isn't typical, but I'm going to pull it up here. When I go into this internet addresses, whatever is in this email section, that's what who it's going to email. You can have multiple emails separated by semicolons. So, for instance, if I emailed this PO and it pulled up in Outlook and it's not the emails I would like in there, make sure, again, that's great testing. Make sure that you're communicating that, because then you might need to update that data of what you're sending to us as far as the emails that go with that PO. Now, you can always modify it and change it so it'll be there for next time. And you can always add emails for that on the Outlook on the email itself that it pulls up. It's just out of your normal Outlook. It's just saving you a couple steps. The key is, though, if you add it into Outlook, like if my email address popped up here and it had my PO attached and the one email address, if I continue to add emails here, it's not going to go back and update the system. So just make sure, in the future, if you have changes, make sure you update it at the vendor card in this location. Make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. Good. So I want to just step back. We've entered a PO, we've printed a PO, we've edited, went to an edit on the status if we needed to. I want to just touch base with kind of the workflow of this, which was the question earlier. So again, not printed, not received, not invoiced. All of this is just filtering the status here. So when the status is new, it means I haven't printed it. So I've been sitting here and entering POs, but I haven't been printing them. That's fine. You can print them all at once. So I can then click all of these and hit print, which will release it. Now, if I don't really want to print them to paper, or I really don't want to send them to email, you can send them to screen, and it'll then print all of those and make them go out. Or maybe I want to send them all and deliver it to email. It'll pop up my 3 different emails to me. So all of those you can do at one time. So that helps you know, to the question that was asked earlier, how do I know which ones I haven't printed yet? This is how you know. This is all the ones that I have that are new. Same with this one. As I go into here, this is telling me everything that is change ordered or released, meaning that I have printed it and sent it at one point, but either I've changed something and I haven't printed it or sent it, or I'm waiting for that receipt to come. So then your workflow will start when we do your receiving walkthrough from this point to say, okay, now I'm ready to move on and actually invoice or receive those items. Make sense as what it's showing me here in these nav panes? Okay. A couple other little quick things that we talked about. If I go to my GP button and go to Smart List, and you can save this again on a shortcut or have it on your toolbar. I'm just going to pull up my Smart List. From purchasing, we have Smart List is our interactive way to gather data in any module that you have security to. So in this case, I have purchase orders and I have purchase order line items. So if I want to see something about line items on purchase orders, I can hit this expansion button, and the star always under each folder is going to be Microsoft's canned kind of here you go data of the system. It's not filtering anything. It's not giving me anything. It'll stop at the first 1,000 records, so you can kind of see what's going on in this list. These other ones, if it has a star behind the name, these are ones that Microsoft gave you at implementation that they thought would be helpful. And they name it, and then they will put a star behind it to let you know that was a canned one that came with your system. If you see one named that doesn't have a star, that is ones that we put out there for you because we think you should like this one. So this is an example of one that is canceled PO line items. So it will show me all line items that had a status of canceled. So remember where I did that before, where I canceled that quantity into there. Now this one is pulled, if I go to the search criteria, all it's doing is taking the canned list, and I added a column to say PO line status, is equal to canceled. Now, I could also do another one, which we'll put on our list to put out there that I don't see that we have, which is canceled quantity. You might not have canceled the whole line item, but you canceled some part of quantity. So what we would do, and actually we could probably do this together, we can go into our columns here. And if I don't have the column, I can search all columns in the searching field. And I can do canceled quantity. Now, if I'm not sure what it is, I can start to type and it'll find me ones that have that in the word, quantity canceled. So maybe I want to show any that are have a quantity canceled greater than 0. And I might want to show different columns here. Maybe I want to show if I go to my columns button here, maybe I want to show that column because I don't have it showing. So I'm just going to type cancel again. And find next, I see the one I want. And then you can move it from this window as well. So maybe I want to move that up next to quantity ordered. So now I see quantity canceled, quantity ordered. So if this is something, you can see this line item had a status. Now I had a status of closed. So it's showing me any that had some quantity amount canceled. Now I can save this favorite and I can call it canceled quantity. And I'm just going to add it. You get a choice to add it to just my user ID or to the whole system. So I'm just going to add it. And so now I can see that here as well, canceled quantity. Now, from this list, I can go search and maybe show me, you can do a temporary search, where I just want to, I don't save it, but maybe I just want to see a certain vendor, or I just want to see a certain date range, etc. So all of that's available in these smart lists. I really highly suggest just get in here and play. Matt's tried to put some POs out there so you have something to play on. The more POs you practice with, the more data you're going to get out there to kind of look at stuff that you would like to look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So purchase line items goes over individual line items. What line items are open on a purchase order right now? What line items are out there? You can do all of that from the smart list and you can export to Excel. One click. Purchase orders is at the higher level, not my individual line items, but these are all the PO numbers that I have out there and the total of what I have. Again, this is the star, so it's showing everything, but I can see open purchase orders by vendor, all open purchase orders, all of that kind of stuff. We have some canned ones out there for you that are in the system. So just click on that, see what you like. You can always modify these to add different columns, to make the search criteria different, all of that great stuff. So play with that as well. Any questions? I'm going to go on for our POs on truck and seeing open POs outside of the system. But is there any question about entering into that PO transaction entry window or modifying that PO as it's out there that we haven't went over that you'd like to see?
On the smart list, somebody creates a report and they just create it for their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And they save it. It shows up for everybody though, or just for the user?
That was that option. Yeah, that's that option that says.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Let me show you that option. It was the option that says to the system. Let me put it here. To the system or to your user ID. So if you want just your user ID, just you. Yeah. Now, if you think it's going to be helpful to other people, you might want to put it to the system.
Save it.
Yeah.
But if people were just trying to look up for their own stuff, you wouldn't want to clog up
Yeah.
everybody's list with,
And a note Jamie made is you only people with security to that area can see that smart list. So note that when you say system, it's system of people who have security to that area.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Good. Any other questions before I move on? And notice Jamie already, as we were talking, Jamie put out there that standard purchase order. It's a new one, so you can just go straight from here to create a new purchase order. If you don't see the one, of course, you can always navigate through the menus that I showed you, transactions, purchase order entry as well. And the other thing I won't forget to mention, because I often do, I'm an old school navigator. I almost always go through the menus because that's what I've done since GP8. They didn't used to have all this other great stuff. So it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but that's where I usually go. But I will say, besides these great little icons, just as a reminder, if you click on any of these navigation panes, like go to the very first menu option where it says purchasing, all of my old school menus here are rolled out for you in the options. Now, you're only going to see the sections and lists that you have security to. I'm logged in as system administrator, so I have access to everything. You probably would not see a lot of these utilities, setups, etc. But you can see purchase order entry from here. A lot of my purchasing people, this really becomes their homepage because it's everything they really need to do is exactly right here on this rollout. So keep that in mind. Again, one of our hopes is that you start to kind of get used to your home screen, get familiar with what it is. I will say, don't spend a ton of time setting up shortcuts, icons, do them to play with, but your database will be written over multiple times, so they won't stay forever. when we get your final database structure, you know, if you added a shortcut here, it's probably not going to be there after the 2 or 3 rounds of changes that we do. But adding it is sometimes nice help, you know, from any window in GP. When you go to purchase order entry, remember you can always go to add to shortcuts, and it will show up over here to the left-hand navigation pane. So purchase order entry, now I can get there right away. I can do the same thing on customizing my toolbar. I can add from any menu. If you know how to get to it through the old school menus here that I was doing, then you can go ahead and say, there's my purchase order entry. I want to add it to my toolbar, and I can add it here. Let me go to the main one. So I want to add here, and I want to add transactions, and I'm going to go through transactions, purchasing, and purchase order entry. And when I do that, I can add that. I'm going to move it down so it'll show up at the end here after cards. And I can choose to say image only, text only, image and text. So I'm just going to do image only, and I'm going to hit OK. And now I have it show up here. So then I can click here and get to my new purchase order. So please play with those options in your system to say, ooh, where do I want to add this? Over here, over here. You can also add a quick link over here, same kind of thing. Hit the edit button. I'm going to do add. I'm going to do a GP window, and it takes me back through the same menu. If I know how to get through it through here, I will be able to get to it to add it to any kind of quick link. And then I hit OK. And if I refresh my home screen here, it will show now I have purchase order entry from here. So you get 50 different ways to get to the window. Play with that. Add it to all 3 spots. It doesn't matter. You can see what you like. People usually gravitate towards one way or another, or, you know, set their things up. Again, it will overwrite, so don't get too cozy. But it's great to play with so you can start knowing your options as you get through the system. We want the less clicks. So the way to achieve that is to find your navigation path that is comfortable for you as a user, and then be able to kind of settle into that. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. The other thing I want to really touch on this walkthrough is some of the stuff that happens for reporting or outside the system. And those are all located. You should have an icon on your desktop that says like Infusion Reports folder. Your Infusion Reports folder, when you go into that, let me just, I jumped right to it, but I want to show you the reports folder. You will see different folders like this on your shared network. What we try to do is put everything that's pertinent to your role into that folder. Now, you will not be able to access this. Is driven by your folder security with how your IT, Gary and John, I know, have been working on to make sure that you have access to the correct folder. So if you can't get here, when you double click on purchases and you get one of those ugly security messages to say, I'm sorry, you don't have access to this. Make sure you shoot that, whether you want to go through Mike and Gary and then to us, or shoot it to us. And we can make sure that we get you set up into the correct folders. Now, in this folder, we've put stuff in here that we want you to start playing with. So one of those is open purchase orders. So I'm going to just open this up. And whenever you open, this is just an Excel feed from your live database. And the hope is that people outside the system can look at purchase orders as well. Now, Excel, this just is Excel. The only thing we've done is connect it to our database. And one thing just about Excel always is that it's always helpful if you're doing anything that's connecting to a live database. Even though Excel is supposed to refresh when it opens, it sometimes doesn't. So just hit this refresh all under your data tab, and it will correctly refresh to what your data is right now. You can also right click in here and do refresh, but I just go to data, hit refresh all, and it helps make sure everything is updated appropriately. in here it's showing me each PO, the vendor number, the required date. Now this, I'm going to go, and I noticed this is hidden here. I'm going to unhide it. I thought I did that before, but so I'm going to hit save so you don't have to unhide that later. So on this required date, we've pulled that date in. Mike, this goes back to our date thing. You might want a different date to show here, which is not a big deal. You just need to communicate which one of those would be helpful for you guys. Now this scheduled delivery date, this is when the warehouse has updated with the promised ship date. I see one thing wrong, and we'll correct that. Matt will correct that after this walkthrough, which is, again, why we always say we'll follow back on open items. That should say not scheduled if it's the same as the PO date. And I know a couple of these are the same as the PO date. So, oh, here's one. So maybe that's not true, Matt. Maybe those others really weren't the 27th and you scheduled them. So notice here it says not scheduled. That's going to be because the promised ship date is the same as the PO date, which means nobody has changed it, which means nobody has updated to the real date it's going to be delivered. Does that make sense?
You keep using ship date and deliver date almost interchangeably. Which one do you mean here?
I'm using the date that it's called in our system. That's called promised ship date. That's the date where the warehouse is going to have it scheduled in order for it to arrive at your door.
So that's not a ship date, that's a delivery.
The field name is called promised ship date.
That's really when it's gonna show up.
So if this date is the same as the PO date, that means nobody's changed it, which means it is not scheduled yet. So it'll show like here, not scheduled. These other ones, someone has changed. Well, here's another one, but the other someone has changed. And so it's showing what is the date that has been scheduled there. Now you might want another date to show up, like the date you think you were going to get it, or the date you anticipate. So when I look at this not scheduled, I know it's not scheduled yet, but I know what a better date is of when you think you're going to receive it. So just let us know if you don't use that required date, which is what I have in here right now. You might have used a different date that goes back to our open item. We can show that here instead.
And we have to tell them which field we want to use for that. If you want the estimated date. Required field. Okay, good. Then there we go. And that's fine.
We just have to, they only have certain verbiage.
Yeah.
So that we have to, what our dates are.
Right.
It has to be internal, that we say ETA equals promise date, or
Yes.
whatever verbiage they have in their system, we have to link those two. So they can't change what their fields say. We just have to know internally
So
what we
have
mean
the
by
ETA.
those dates.
So we can use the promise date as the supplier ship date. Okay. We gotta,
Good, feel good. And you can always change it on the label on like this report. I just can't change it in the system. So obviously like in this one, we didn't call this promise ship date. We called it scheduled delivery date because that made more sense to the people looking at this report. The goal of what this report will do is to show you all open POs and then be able to allow people who have access to that folder within your system. Now, you can also put this, many people put this in the sales management folder as well. So we can put a link to there. But it's anyone who is able to reach into your system would be able to pull this up, filter by a vendor, by class, by truck date, by what's supposed to come in tomorrow, and to be able to see what open POs are out into the system. Any questions on that before I move on?
You want to be able to edit what's an ETA that hasn't come in yet, that's not scheduled in.
Yep, so that's our next point. So that's a great segue into this next part. So where I went here is I just went to my purchases folder, review POs on truck. Now, obviously within the system, anyone like as far as if you remember from our design plan, anybody with access inside your purchase order area can always go into a purchase order. So I haven't received this purchase order yet, but I've been called and it's been scheduled. I can go into the system, click edit onto that purchase order. I can modify that promised ship date to say, oh, they've called and now it's going to come on May 2nd. So you, of course, can then schedule that down and have that changed. And you can hit save. But we've given you a little bit easier, what we feel is an easier option outside the system. If I go to review POs on truck, I can see every single open PO in my system. Now, if you have some assigned to different trucks, like I have this one that was assigned to Pace, I can pick that and it'll show me all POs that were assigned to that truck. Now, that's kind of a bad example because I only had one truck. This one's a little bit better that Matt put out there. He just put a test one out there. So whatever truck ID you've attached those to, you then can see all the POs related to there. Then what you can do is update all of them. So all of them are going to arrive on May 2nd. I can copy that down because it's just Excel. And then I can hit this button, update truck ID and ship date, and it will update all of those POs to the new date. Let's see if this works. Matt assures me it does. I feel confident in Matt. I did not push the buttons. I was a little behind with going to WSWA, so I didn't get that. Usually goes, the first one sometimes takes a little bit longer. As you do multiple, it'll be fine because it has to validate and open. So yeah, it says it was successful. So if I refresh this, I'm going to refresh my data here. You can see that all of these changed to 5.2. So instead of going through every single one of them, it will automatically then update them to 5.2 instead of me having to open every individual PO. Now, in addition to that, I can make a new truck ID. So if I want to move it to another truck, so let's say out of these 3, they called and said that 2 of them are going to be kicked to a different truck. You can type in, you don't have to have it existing. Maybe I want to, this truck, if I had Pace as an example, maybe I make a Pace 2 truck and I can update just 2 of those to a different truck in order to kick it off and create a different one. They split my load. Now I have 2 trucks coming.
232 is far.
Is this call from the sales room? I don't know where she is. Right here.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm a little concerned about creating new IDs on the fly like this. Is that you know what I'm saying, Corrie? I don't know if that could create a potential problem.
What problem do you think it would create?
Well, aren't we supposed to be maintaining these somewhere?
Truck ID is not really, unless you're going to add, but truck ID literally is just a grouping to say all these POs are together. Now, you will see the drop-down list here. So like if I had, if it's moving a total different one, but I think you want to allow them to create because there might be 3 or 4 California trucks. And when they split, you might have all 3 or 4 en route. So you kind of got to, kind of create on the fly a lot of times, but that's up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. Any questions about how to update this? We want you to play with it. As you just saw, it's ready for you to play with. So go in there, update some POs, move them to a different truck, get familiar, put your realistic examples in. Obviously, we know ours are kind of test ones, which often make it hard for you to visualize, but put your examples in there.
For purposes of the warehouse, for receiving.
Yep.
And Tommy wants to know what ETA is for next week, date range.
Yep.
Can you do a date range? Like from Monday to Friday next, what's expected to show up?
Yep. Yeah, he can do a date range either if he was looking at his pre-receiving report, which we're not going to go over today. We go over that in the receiving section. We did in the design plan, though. He can run his pre-receiving report through a date range, but you also can do that through here. on your ship date in Excel. Whenever you have those dates, if you do select multiples, you can select down through a range here. So you have options to say, or you could do all month, you know, hey, I want this month that's coming, and then look at it that way. But he could, if he was in this report, he could do it that way. I would think probably what he's going to do is his pre-receiving report, Jerry, which we'll walk through in the receiving part, and that has a straight date range from this date to this date. That's what most of my warehouse guys do.
It's a question for my own purchasing department. Do we get notified when things are shipped? Do we actually get a ship?
I don't know if that's a broader question as far as pace goes, but I know through like Albatran, they'll send us something, they'll say when they're going to ship it or when to expect to ship, and then it's ETA, so when it's going to arrive in the port. As far as pace goes, I think that's a Barbara question. I don't know if she knows that.
Do we get, really from anywhere in the world, I guess Albatron, I know Gatto, I get it all the time, I get copies of Gatto. But do we get shipping confirmations when things have been shipped?
The pace, the Western carriers is a shipping notice of what gets picked up that day. Not really. No. I mean, you're seeing the Albatrans because it's a container, and then they send a shipment confirmation. But for everyone else, no. I see like the California Cornerstone, they'll send the bill of lading report, and that's when I know it's shipped, but it comes a day or two afterwards. So that's when I go into the system and I update the estimated arrival date of those orders that are on the California consolidation.
So it's possible for some things that get past the ETA date, you don't realize they never shipped it.
Right.
Until
Right, until after, and then that's when I start questioning, right, because I'm trying to look to see what should be coming in and then what's past due. But it's kind of difficult.
Everyone doesn't give you, yes, this has been shipped.
Right,
this date.
right. Basically, all I'm saying is when it has shipped, and then Tommy will be telling me, oh, it's scheduled. But it's kind of after the fact.
It's not a complete circle. is it?
No, no.
All right, sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Okay, that's fine. Good. The next thing I want to show you, again, this is located here in your purchases report folder, is this truck consolidation PO report. Now, when you open it, I'm on your server, but when you open it, you'll just get this prompt box that will allow you to say a PO date range. Most of the time where I have distributors use this is I've entered my POs, I've assigned them to a trucks, and I want to kind of validate how much I'm building to a load, or I need to send this information to some kind of consolidator. A lot of people just send them copies of the PO, so you might not need to send that to them, but maybe you just want to validate the weight and the cases for how much you're putting on or off into a load of trucks. So you would do the PO date. Typically you're doing it today and you're checking it today, but I put a range because I wasn't for sure. And then as long as you put on that bottom where we went over before, your truck comment, I just used this test one that Matt did so because it had several POs. Then it will print me out this little report here that will show me each PO number. This is PO 13, 15, and 16. The supplier it's to. If I had a supplier shipping note attached, it would show here as well. The case equivalent, the date of the PO date, the weight that I have for that. This weight is based off your items having weights attached to it. So if the item information does not have weights, it's not going to show weights here. As you can see, I have 0 here. I'm going to guess it's probably because that item does not have weight set up on it. And then it will total my total weights for there and my total case equivalents in order for my truck consolidation. Does that make sense? Okay. So looking at open POs, what we want you to do for testing is enter POs. We suggest you enter a variety of them to make sure you feel comfortable with that. The next thing you want to do is look at those open POs inside the system and outside the system. Make sure you feel comfortable with what's showing, what you feel is going to be helpful for your organization. Then we want you to modify the POs. Inside the system, make changes to those POs. Outside the system, through the review POs on truck. Review your reports, like the consolidation report or the open PO stuff, just to make sure you feel comfortable it's showing you all of the information you would want. The one report we have not shown you at the start of all of this, which would be your PO requirements report, we're going to show that to you separately. They're still working on a few of the changes from your decisions, and we're not ready to show that to you yet. We got a little delayed on that process, but they're hoping to come back with that. So that in the purchasing unit of measure, we need to show you, as well as where to change the FOB going forward. That's wrapped up into your pricing modification right now. So we're going to show you that along in your pricing time. The last thing I have to show you that doesn't necessarily relate just to purchase orders, but we're going to wrap that into the testing of purchase section, is your vendor entry form. So as you might have remembered in our design plan, we have this vendor entry form that allows you to quickly set up a vendor. Now, you can set up a vendor directly into the system, going to cards, purchasing, vendor. Everything I'm going to walk through on the form, you can do straight here in the system. The only reason people find it more helpful to do it on the form is it does allow you to have different required fields sometimes than what the system will make you do. We can default certain stuff so you don't have to quite do as much sometimes. And a lot of times they find it, especially if you're doing a workflow outside the system. With vendors, I will say I have about a 50-50. Some do it through this form, some just key it straight in the system. So on your vendor form, you're going to enter your vendor number, whatever vendor number that is. So I'm going to go in my maintenance here. Now, we also have the ability for you to look up in the form as well. So for instance, I think vendor 11. So if I did a vendor lookup here, if I thought this vendor was already existing, I can look it up just for ability for me to do a quick scan to make sure I haven't already set up that vendor. So in this case, I know I have it. I'm going to assign this vendor to vendor 11. Now, as soon as I hit tab off of that, it went ahead and automatically filled in for me a primary address ID as a starting point. I'm going to go ahead and enter Corrie's Winery. And it then automatically fills in for me the licensee name and check name as the same. Now, for classes, you guys have picked a few different classes here in your system. What kind of inventory class it's going to go to, spirits, wine, non-alc, those are not your list. That's Jamie shaking her head, so it looks like we have an issue there. I'm going to refresh data. Nope, I just needed to refresh my data. Inventory is all I have there. You've also picked customer, employee, or expense.
We briefly did discuss the idea of having two different inventory classes for your vendors. So that is an open item if you guys decide to do that. They both need to start inventory, but you can put a differentiating letter on the end of it.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have to. That's just an option that we threw out there.
I don't know. I'll review that.
Okay. Vendor account number, it defaults to have none, but if for some reason you knew what your account number was with your vendor, that's always helpful information, especially on your AP check. You can enter it there. Now, within here, you have to have one primary address. Typically, the primary on a vendor is the one you're going to cut the check to. So your remit to address. So if I know what I'm going to cut the check to for Corrie's Winery, I could put it in. If that was not the case, then I can add additional addresses as well. So I would fill in the primary. Maybe I don't know all the information. That's okay for now. I'm going to go ahead and add my purchasing, which I'm going to do in here as well. Now, purchasing, you might not have all this information for. Right now, we still have it as orange. I don't think that came back. You could say it's not required to have address, city, state, zip, maybe and phone number, so none of these are required. A lot of times in purchasing, you guys don't necessarily have an address. Maybe you do and you just didn't fill it in. I'm going to put Knoxville. Good. Now, the most important thing for your purchasing side of the world is that you make sure you put in this email address, which is, again, what the purchase order is really going to be sent to. So I'm going to hit save and close. And I'm going to go back into this primary, and I'm going to enter my billing address.
Well, that's true.
Corrie's Winery is all new. So I've entered my billing address, I've entered my purchasing address, so now I'm good to go on that side. And that's the main part of what you're filling out here. Some other information that...
Address is physical address, right? Not email address?
Yeah, I entered both on the purchasing.
Oh, you entered both?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Word email. I sit too far back here.
Yep, you're good. Yep. Now, you can also enter, minimum days in stock, order up 2 days, lead time days, anything that would your days here. We should have taken that off because you guys aren't using the purchasing demand system. So we'll take that off. That doesn't really apply to you as far as that goes. Lead time, I think you were keeping that in number of days. So that one I'm going to leave on there for you. These two we're going to remove. We'll just gray them out because it doesn't really apply for you. Yeah. Jamie was saying the required fields is what we haven't got back, so maybe that's why they haven't removed it yet. Credit limit, unlimited, or an amount, or none, meaning I need to have something. So in this case, you're letting them have unlimited credit, or this vendor, unlimited credit limit. You have unlimited credit limit to this vendor, I should say. This is where you assign what that address ID is to the action. So for instance, if I was using my purchasing address ID, I want to use my purchasing. If for remit to, I'm letting it go to the primary. Ship from is typically the same as the purchasing, but it's not really used in a form action. So for you guys, it really doesn't matter, but we typically set it the same as the purchasing. Comment 1, comment 2 are straight things for you to use. It's not necessarily used anything in the system. Payment terms are your payment terms with this vendor, net 30 or whatever you've been assigned. The only other information is the stuff that has to do with your reporting agencies. So reporting vendor ID is if I had multiple distribution points for Corrie's winery, like we talked about earlier with Diageo, then I can group them all together under one vendor ID. So I could say I have Diageo, for this purpose, New Jersey, I've got Jacksonville, Florida, and I want to link them all together under one vendor ID. You would do that here. Depletion report agency, this is your list of whether it's BDN, whether it's Trade Pulse, etc. If they're going to be VIP, they should be the first one listed. So VIP would be the first. If you're going to report to a secondary agency, you would list that secondary next. The vendor code is the code that the depletion agency requires. It's usually a 3-digit code or something like that. Typically, VIP is a little different, but they have a VIP distribution ID that you enter here. these two fields are not necessary for you. Again, those will be removed. I think they were just waiting on that for your required fields, but we should have went ahead and removed that. Same with that one. The last place that I have for you is your PO note, and that is what we talked about already on the PO. That's the note that stays with that vendor when I enter a PO, and it will default in automatically. Make sense? Once I hit the submit button, it will clear this form and set up the vendor into the system. The only thing I'll say about that is it will clear the form when I set up to the system because you no longer need it in the form. You don't maintenance the vendor through the vendor form. You're going to go into the system. Here, if there's something you think you need to follow up on with somebody or do something like that, it's just Excel. So just do file save as and put it out. You still need to stay in your reports folder. Don't put it to your desktop because your desktop doesn't have the same links. You're actually working on the server right now. So I'm going to just put my initials here and the date. So I'm going to do that. And then I can go to that later and pull it up and then finish the process if I wanted. Now,
You did that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You went back and you finished it later.
Yes.
And then hit submit and clear.
Yes.
What happens to the Excel spreadsheet that you just saved? I'm assuming it still stays there?
No, you're on the one. You're not going back to, you're opening the one you saved. So now I did a save as. If I wanted to finish it later, I'm going to go back into my folder and pull up the one I saved. And I'm on that. I'm not working back on that original form. And then when I hit submit and clear, it'll clear this form.
Right, but.
If I don't hit save.
No, but when you hit submit and clear.
Yes.
That Excel file that you saved individually will still be out there. My point.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Right?
Yes.
And that's all.
Yes, you're exactly right.
There's a back where that automatically deletes the thing after you hit submit and clear.
Yes, you're right.
Okay. So we have to remember to go out and do that. Okay.
Yes, you're exactly right.
All right, no problem.
Good. And there's a couple little cleanup things on this one that we will have to you next week. It looks like those fields that should have been removed already. But then that hopefully this next week will be ready for you to play with. Inside the system, I suggest then you pull up a vendor, look at, we kind of went over this more in your data review section, but again, the vendor card is not very complicated. So once you go into your vendor card, you can look here. The one thing I see, we have a lot of your primary addresses set to purchasing. We might want to change that. Most people, we have them set to their either something called primary, or in your case, you're looking like you called them payables. So we might, I'll work with my team to revisit that. That's typically not what we do on that side. But other than that, your data should be going in here. Again, options button will show you the questions about the credit limit, the payment term, a lot of other information that we don't necessarily use a lot. If it was a 1099, you can do that inside the system. You do get a choice of a box type. All of that is here. You have some information like the FEIN, which is you can put your tax ID, their vendor tax ID registration number there if you would like. The other thing would be here at additional. This is where the reporting vendor is that I went over in the form. So all of that, again, is located off of the main window of that process, straight from here. And the shipping instructions we went over as well. So all of that is located off of, you can get to it from your main menu under cards, purchasing, vendor. Or when in the rollout menu here, cards, vendor. Feel good about that process? Makes sense?
I think we have to work with it.
Okay.
But yeah,
your goal is to test some of that. Again, we'll release this one to you this next week. Purchase orders are ready for you to go in and start entering and printing to screen now, just not email. And then this will get released to you next week so that you can really start getting in there and clicking around, testing, playing, navigating, all of that great stuff. Please keep a list of your feedback. Sometimes people just need some help getting started. So email that Infusion Hartley team, the email group that we have for you. It goes to all of us on your team so that one of us will be able to jump in. Matt is your primary contact for your purchasing area side of the world, but me and Matt will be kind of tag teaming that. So as you get stuff together and you're saying, gosh, I'm not seeing this happen here, or I'm getting an error, or maybe I just don't even know where to go, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email. We'll jump on the screen with you and make sure that we kind of do that together. Any questions about what you should test, how to move forward from here, any of the stuff we went over as far as entering a purchase order, printing it, modifying it, or entering a vendor?
I have a question for you. It's not in
Sure.
regards to the question you just asked. And I don't remember if we accommodated this at the item level. But there's three basic ways we buy things here. One is ex-seller, one is FOB, and one is CIF. Did we accommodate those three differences at the item level in order to purchase it? Because we have to purchase one way or the other. Or did we not accommodate that? Is there no field to show whether we buy CIF, FOB, or ex-seller?
I've never had that conversation with you guys before.
Well, you'll never be able to say that again.
Yeah, I don't think that was brought up during our design plan that you needed a field to identify what way you're purchasing.
It's important, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are certain countries, France being one of them, and I'll break it down beyond just FOB, CIF, and ex-seller. And I did this all the time when I did the purchasing. But I know a lot about wine. I know that south of France, it ships out of Marseille. North of France, it ships out of Le Havre. And I know the wines that come from the north, and I know the wines that come from the south. Bill Soroka does too, but I'm not so sure he segments the containers. By the way, the freight forwarder will truck them anywhere. Yeah, or if you don't tell them, they'll truck them to where they think they can attach to a container. But the fact of the matter is, in my day, I made sure everything south of France consolidated out of Marseille. And I made sure everything north of France consolidated out of Le Havre. If it's ex-seller, we pay the freight from the winery to the port. On those items, I can make consolidations because I'm paying the freight there. Of course, I don't want to freight from Provence to Le Havre. That would be stupid on my end because it's a long truck drive from there to there. Same thing with Spain. Bilbao is at the very northern port of Spain. Jerez, where sherry comes from, is the very southwestern part of Spain. They don't come out of the same port, nor would you want to consolidate north of Spain with south of Spain. That would be very expensive to do on the Spanish light container. So a couple of things. We want to know, by the way, CIF you can't consolidate because CIF means the supplier buys the container and he's not going to let competitive goods go on his container. You cannot consolidate on a CIF issue. So it's very important that we know CIF, FOB, ex-seller. And it's also very important to know what port it ought to come out of, at least for certain countries.
Mm-hmm.
Some countries it doesn't matter, it's only one port.
Yeah.
But Italy, Spain, and France is more than one port. So I'm wondering if there's a field that can be used where we can keep ourselves and identify the information necessary, because you have decisions to make here.
Yeah, so that would be on a per item basis you're looking for. So that goes back to those classifications on an item, you definitely can keep fields on an item. Now, one unfortunate thing is, we've kind of passed that item thing. We can always go back because you're not live. So that's the fortunate part, I guess. You haven't come up with that after you went live. But we've already kind of mapped those fields and created your new item form, which you're already doing a walkthrough for. So on an item, you can definitely keep lots of different classifications. You have one field, the subcategory, that you never named what you want to use it for. So you definitely could add something there that might be helpful to you. Now, where you want to show it, do you want to show it on the purchase requirements report? Do you want to just have it on, a smart list so they can see it inside the system? Or is that, somewhere that you probably want to talk a little bit about and see where you want to see that information? But you definitely could add that as a classification into the item, but it sounds like it's something you want to assign on an item basis.
And somewhere along the line of creating a purchase order, I mean, someone should be able to identify, you can't consolidate this, it's a CIF situation. There's no consolidation available to do that.
The system won't tell them that, but, like pop a box up or anything. But because you're not, it's not validating against anything, you're just entering a purchase order. But what it could be is that on that purchase requirements report, which is what they're really checking before, or some of the other places, maybe we make sure that that's what they look at, that we put that field somehow on there, but you'll need to identify where you want to keep that. And so I'll go back. Mike, you feel good about where to look at that from the item walkthrough?
No, but I have to take a look at it.
Okay.
You mean where it should be placed?
Yeah, where to look at what your field options are. So we did your item walkthrough last time.
That I know.
Yeah, okay.
No problem.
Yep.
Yeah, I already made a note of it.
Okay, good.
By the way, just about every market deals with the same issue. This is not a Connecticut issue.
No, I'm sure. I think they just don't keep it inside the system, Jerry. That's probably, as I'm sure you guys do, a lot of that purchasing knowledge, as is kept up in people's heads. Now, is that the right way or the wrong way? Not sure. Now, some of those that use purchasing demand systems, you do pour a lot more into those, but.
I know they're not anywhere near each other.
Yeah. Good. Any other questions as it relates to vendors or purchasing? Well, wonderful.
I have a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's a technical question. I seem to be having trouble accessing the server.
Okay.
It could be something silly like my screen resolution, whatever. Who should I call about that? Is it John?
Yeah. If you just want to send it, any problem you have, send to that Infusion Hartley team, and we'll make sure that the right person gets back to you. And that way we can.
My computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Normally we have one of our consultants send help, and they'll bring in John if they feel like they need to. So just email it to that Infusion Hartley, and we'll make sure we address it.
Okay.
Good. Well, thanks, guys, for your time. I'll upload this video. Matt will be following up with a testing part. Again, we are ready for you to get inside the system and enter POs today. The few items that will be followed up on is the PO requirements report, your email, which will be hopefully up and going in a few weeks, the purchasing unit of measure, which hopefully you'll hear more about by the end of next week, and then FOB changes will come along as we do your pricing. So thanks, guys, for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.